return back to reality and the concrete, which was expressed with such theoretical eloquence in the preceding section, we now want to do precisely that. So we have two people who are have more of an experience, so to say, on the ground. On the one hand, we're very happy to welcome Corina Giacomello, who is an associate professor at the University of Chiapas in Mexico, and who's working on drug policy, women, and incarceration, and who's going to give a perspective in the future from that point of view. And we also have very happy to welcome and to receive here Jerry Yang, who's a senior partner at HCDC. It's a venture capital firm that invests in what's known as hard tech, so hardware and advanced hardware technology. You even have, I think, a fusion reactor company I've seen in Mong. Yes, I saw that on the website. And he's going to tell us more about what that is, what he's doing, but also what the perspective on the future looks like from the point of view of the world of business and above all venture capital and tech investments. So I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting section, and we're going to structure it just like the last time, that the speakers have about half an hour each to bring about their perspectives, and then we can open up for a more general discussion and anticipate to go on for about an hour 15 minutes or something like that. Okay? So thank you very much once again for coming back, and without further ado, I pass the microphone over to Corina.
Thank you. Thank you. So good afternoon to all of you. First of all, I want to thank Adam for the invitation, and Michael, of course, and also the sponsors for paying for my ticket and my hotel and my lunch, keeping all the receipts. No, I didn't. I'm just keeping the receipts that they
Okay.
sent. But no, thank you. Thank you for organizing this and for inviting me. And also would like to thank Adam for making me think about the future of prisons. I've been doing research on prison for 18 years, which may be a lot or not. It's a lot for my life. And I've always thought about prison in present terms or past terms, you know, how they've become what they are and what's happening in them and who is in there and what's their story and what kind of proposals we can make, but never about the future. So when he invited me, I was absolutely terrified. I didn't know what to say, and now it will be very hard to stop me from talking. I want to warn you. So please, at the minute 30, your elbow, you hit. Okay, so let's talk a bit about the future of prisons. But before, let's understand, or I will tell you how in which way I'm conceiving prisons in this participation. First of all, there are places we hardly look at. If we don't have a connection with prisons, either because we are in prison, we have a family member in prison, we belong to communities that are constantly criminalized, or we are abruptly, touched by them. Unless we do research or we actually want to become involved, prisons are not present in our life in their material dimension, to go back to something that was mentioned before. But they are there in the landscape as a form of social device and a means of social control, as much as it could have changed. So first of all, there's this invisibility of prison, and in a way prisons are institutions that do not move too much. They're like this gigantic turtle. So in the years I've gone in and out of prisons as a researcher, of course things change. I'm not always giving the same conference, but sometimes there is the feeling that the people in prison are always the same. We're always punishing for the same way. We're always going after the poor, the indigenous, black people, the dispossessed, people with horrible life stories, with very traumatic life stories, that we just keep doing the same, and that the living conditions, especially in Latin America, are simply appalling, and that in a way we are criminalizing and incarcerating entire communities, because prison is not about the person in prison, it's about the whole family and the community. And actually, if I remember correctly, in Italy, Naples region is the region with the highest prison rate in Italy. So, the prisons are there. They don't move too much, but in a way there's a lot of movement in and out of prison. So people are in prison and can also leave because of, temporary permissions, or because of medical reasons, or because their sentence will be finished. We have family members going in and out. We have researchers. But again, from society, it's not really part of what we think about. So how can we think about prisons? I would like to think about prisons in 3 terms. And again, there are 30 minutes. I want to tell you many things, because I want to tell you how prisons will disappear. Sorry for the spoiler. But in order to do that, I have to be very quick, and I have to make some generalizations. So I'm not saying that prison is only 3 things, but this is how I want to see it today. So prison as a building, in a way, as an institution. That it's what we normally think about when we think about prison, as part of a larger continuum of regulations, laws, sentencing practices, institutions such as prosecutorial offices, courts, rituals, the ritual of detention, the ritual of sentencing, the ritual of bringing someone into prison, the ritual of bringing someone out of prison. So in that sense, as part of the criminal justice system, prison is basically a building, and it's being conveyed as part of a matter of technical decisions and technical responsibilities. It's something that some people do because some people break the law, and that's what it is about, basically. Then we have prison as a means for social control, which we were told before that it may have changed. It might be not like that in all societies or in all times, but I think it's still the case when we think about a means for social control. Of course, for people who are in prison, who are disciplined into being in a certain way, for the communities they belong to, who are always warned of what will happen if they behave as the other people around the community behave. So prison as a constant threat and as a constant reality, but also as a means of social control for the spectators, which is us. And the fact that some people are sent to prison validates us as the righteous ones, as the ones who will be freed from that risk if we continue behaving in the proper way, if we have the right passport, if we speak the right language, if our skin is of the appropriate color. So we are validated because of the deprivation of liberty, but also because of the unvalidation of other people. In that case, I think that prison is still valid as a means of social control, and it is so in the country and in the continent where I live, which is Latin America and Mexico. So it's a very diverse society, but it's also a very divided society. We have, I've interviewed hundreds of people in prison, and there's absolutely no connection between the life of the women that I speak with and the life that I live and the life of my friends. Not the same economic possibilities, not the same color of skin to start with, not the same schools. Well, my child and their sons will never be in the same school, private school, horrible public schools, never the same health system, never the same living conditions, never the same capacity of reading and writing. So in those societies where economic, ethnic divides are so wide, and prison still is a means of social control to validate that the dominating class has actually the dominating class. So I think it's still, again, a valid argument in some societies. Now, prison is also a sentiment. There is this sentence which is being attributed to different people, but I like it most when it's attributed to Dostoevsky, because he's one of my favorite writers, and he was in prison, who says that by judging a society, you have to cross the doors of its prison. To actually know a society, you have to go inside the prison. And by the way the prisoners are treated, that's Nelson Mandela, you will understand how the people outside prison are treated and how society, what's the ethics of society in a way. So prison is a sentiment in terms of punishment as a means of social control and an institution, punishment as a social institution that we still need to guarantee social cohesion. Even, if it's there remotely, as something that's changed, of course, but it's still echoing somewhere, but also as a sentiment of how a nation or a state is progressing in terms of its ethics, social equality, gender equality, economic parity, and so on. So, of course, sentiments change across regions, within states, and so the prison system will be different. Around the world, we have 223 prison systems in independent countries and dependent territories. In Mexico, we have more than 200 prisons. I can assure you that each prison is a prison system per se. We have around 11,500,000 people around the world in prison, in pretrial sentence or convicted, of which 6.9% are women, but numbers and tendencies differ. So also our speculation of the future cannot be the same, because the world is not the same, and because not for all societies the same will happen at the same time. So we have, for example, Western Europe, where the prison population is decreasing. So in the world, at the global level, the prison population has increased by 24% between 2000 and 2022, a bit less than the general world population, which has increased by 28%. But in Oceania, it's increased by 82%. In the Americas, by 43%. In Europe, it has decreased. So the sentiment and the use of prison as a building and prison as a means of social control has changed differently. In terms of the world female population, this has increased by 59%, so much more than the general prison population, much more than the general population outside of prison in the same period. But again, in Europe, it's gone up of 8.4%, in the Americas of 152%. Actually, my main line of work for the past 15 years was, not surprisingly, women in prison for drug offenses, because the drug law enforcement is the main reason why women are being incarcerated in Latin America. And with these numbers, there's no surprise. So, again, in order to understand the changes and the possible future of prison, we need to understand, of course, their present, but also their differences and how they mean different things to different contexts. So, as I said, I also wanted to say that sentiment has also an influence on research. So as I've said, as Adam said, I mainly focus on women in prison in Latin America, in Mexico. I mainly do field work. So of course, in my researches, in my books, in my publications, there will be literature review, theoretical review, legal review, judicial standards, but a lot of interviews and field work. So research is informed by people with lived experience. And it's always connected to civil society organizations, international organizations, and the absolute need and conviction of academic knowledge as a means for social transformation and social justice. That's very much common in Latin American academia, because we don't have a sector of, policymakers that are super informed and stable government to government. So academia needs to play a very prominent and present role in the creation of social change. But I think it's also a commitment for those of us who work with certain social topics. And also I teach in the public university of the poorest state in Mexico. So as you can imagine, it would be absurd as a white woman educated from a middle class global north country not to at least try to make a change in the conditions of people that have not a voice and often are absolutely unseen. So I want to say this because part of my presentation about my speculation about prison is moved by my feminist commitments, by my abolitionist commitments, but also by trying to always intersect academic knowledge with social transformation at the international, national, and local level. So, as I said, I will say it again, prisons will disappear. I won't be alive to see it, and neither will you. So it will take a long time. So I'm going to tell you what will happen, how they will come to disappear. It will happen in some places before than others. In some places, there will become museums. But in 200-300 years, there will be memorials, and people will go and see them, and they won't believe that we were actually keeping millions of people incarcerated. But that's in 300 years. Now let's talk the previous 30 to 40. Okay, how will that happen? So of course, Western Europe will be the heart of prison abolition. Why? Because of the tendencies I've already described. So prison as an institution will start to decrease. There will be less people in prison, a larger use of alternatives to incarceration. Many crimes that are now crimes will be erased by criminal codes. There will be more mobility between people in prison and outside, so they will go out to work, and they will take their kids to school, and they will go to university, and then go back to prison. So prisons will start to become more porous. Does that make sense in English? Okay. There will be more interchange, more mobility. There will be more use of restorative justice, even in very violent cases, such as terrorism, femicide, and homicide. So there will also be more use of technology. There will be an increase of electronic monitoring. That will be one of the side effects, but will still be one of the reasons why prisons will have less people. There will be more knowledge about prisons, because what will happen? There will be more technology inside prison, which is something that happened in the pandemic and will be restored and expanded. Lots of iPads, mobile phones, parenting programs for people in prison who will be then able to connect and implement that knowledge with their children outside of prison and during the prison visits. There will be more communication between families. There will be also more videos and possibility for people outside that have no connection to know what's happening in prison, and for people in prison to communicate with all of us. So there, the sentiment will be changing. The building, the institution will be reducing its population, and there will be, that's the second point, a lesser need for social control. So because of this, there will be a reduction in the prison population. So the prison population will be sent, and some prisons will start to close because it will be too expensive to keep prisons with less population. So what will happen there? More transfers. People will be taken to prisons which are far away from home because they are the prisons that will remain open. That will cause distress for families. It will discuss anger. It will cause civil cases and cases before the European Court of Human Rights. All of this will contribute to changing the sentiment and to making prison as undesirable and basically outdated. There will be a general call for something else. As I said, that something else will be already happening through alternatives to incarceration, restorative justice, and so on. The two things, point one, prison as an institution and also as a means of social control, will be going together. Then there also will be, and I know that's the most fairy tale part of my intervention, there will be a better improvement in health services and education services in all our societies. There will be more funding in the health sector, especially in mental health. People who face vulnerable situations that then sometimes, for the development of their life, lead them to prison because criminalization is the only option that society leaves open for them, will be detected earlier. There will be more work focused on childhood. There will be more holistic work with families. And AI will help a lot to create more humane, humanized solutions to problem situations in society. So there will be an improvement in the situation of our society as a whole, which will also in turn influence on the reduction of people in prison and criminalization of certain sectors. So it will all go for the best, slowly. And there will be 5 minutes?
No, 15 minutes.
Okay. Oof, okay. Then there will be a seize of the momentum. People will be able to see it, to catch it. There will be the good conditions to start calling for the abolition of prisons. As I said, point one, less people in prison, more visibility, more empathy. Point two, society better equipped to deal with itself and with people who are in prison who will come out of it. So there will be this momentum. In the European level, which will lead the way, the Council of Europe will be the one actually taking up the flag of prison abolition. There will be a convention on the elimination of prisons with a super sophisticated and more formal name, but that will be the aim of it, to eliminate prisons from the face of Europe. There will be handbooks and guidelines, and if I'm not old enough, I hope they will hire me to write one of them, because that's what I like to do. There will be recommendations about how to decrease the prison population around the world. At the UN level, there will be some traction as well, but the Security Council, particularly Russia, the US, and China, will be pretty much against prison reduction and prison abolition, so it will be much more difficult than at the European level. There will be backlashes and side effects. The main side effect will be what is called e-carceration. It's a phenomenon mainly present in the US, and it's related to electronic monitoring, but it will also happen more extensively in Europe. Electronic monitoring is a reality also in the criminal justice system of Europe, but it's much less used than in the US. However, there will be an increase. There will be profits to be made of it. There will be, in the case of Latin American countries, a lot of corruption related to e-carceration. It will also increase. But it will be just for some time. Then when the side effects of e-carceration will be clear to all the people opting for a more humane way of dealing with crime and punishment, there will be, again, a reduction in e-carceration because it's basically against human rights and privacy and many other things. So, There also will be some more surveillance on the outside that will not be able to avoid it. There will be people who will call for reform instead of abolition. That will also be sorted with. There will be also talks about rehabilitation, because the debates in prison don't really change. Since the 18th century, we are still talking more or less about the same thing, criminalizing the poor, rehabilitation, and so on. That will be one of the debates. What are we going to do with people who come out of prison? What are we going to do with prison guards and unemployment? What are we going to do with all the people who are involved with the prison regime? So there will be many debates regarding that. There will be, in Latin America, prisoners who will be against prison abolition. Those who have interest, those who control prisons, like to do extortions, kidnapping, drug production, and drug trafficking. So there will be riots against prison abolition. So there will be all sorts of realities, and that's important to take into account. There will be one steady path. No, it won't be steady. There will be one thread led by Western Europe, but there will be many dimensions on the ground. And but anyway, it will continue and will bring about many good changes. Like death penalty will be completely abolished everywhere, even in the Vatican, where I think it's still legal as far as I remember. Well, the last time I checked, I'm not sure, it could have changed. There will be a general paradigm shift, and it will be super interesting to see feminist movements, because feminism has usually stayed out of the prison debate. There are many feminist organizations or movements that actually look into the reality of prisons. And there are some tendencies within feminism, at least in Latin America, which we call usually, although I think it's a terrible term, punitivist feminism. And I've used it many times. This is the last time I use it, because it doesn't say anything. It's just a label to discriminate against something without explaining it. But there will be much more capacity to implement restorative justice also in very difficult cases such as femicide, and there will be other ways of addressing gender-based violence that are not related to the criminal justice system. And in that, progressive feminist movements will have a lot to say and to do to bring about that change. Actually, women in prison will be the first ones to be released, together with non-binary people, indigenous people, adolescents in conflict with the law. And then at some point, heterosexual men will also come out, but it will be at the very end. There will, yes, yeah, there will, yes. Not all of them. There will still be some custodial aspects. So punishment as a social institution will not disappear. We will still have punishment in schools, in the family, in sexuality, in intimate partner relationships. Punishment will still be present because it's a sentiment we have. There will still be forms of arbitrary detention, such as compulsory drug treatment centers. There will still be custodial settings for people accused of very severe crimes, including terrorism, but with the possibility of implementing restorative justice programs when the conditions actually allow for it. The criminal justice system won't disappear. There will be a net widening effect, but it will be wider somewhere and less wide in other parts. So this will slow down the pace, but the change will be irreversible. And then there was something very interesting, and this is the end. So people in prison and people in formerly incarcerated prison will start, lots of people will be speaking. People in prison in favor of this movement, people in prison, family members, academia, international organizations, rock stars, former presidents who will talk about how they went and visited their father in prison and how painful it was. There will be really a big social movement around it. But then when the convention will be signed and prisons will start to close, formerly incarcerated people will start talking about the freedoms they had in prison, what they could actually find that they couldn't find in society. They will talk about art and theater. They will talk about how they could live their sexuality absolutely freely. They will tell us how when we are outside, we can spend 2 hours with someone on a bus and not even be able to say goodbye when we leave the bus. They will tell us about the isolation we've been talking about in these hours. And they will tell us how that's absolutely inconceivable in prison if you see someone not to say at least, good morning, how are you hungry? So they will tell us about the freedoms they found, and they will tell us about the cages we live in. And there will be something that will be very distressing for those robotic kits Leopoldina referred to, and for people who've lived, in this sort of mixture of contexts where we are doomed by AI, but we can also find agency, and in the middle of uncertainty, it will be very distressing to actually find a path. It will be difficult to live without incarceration, and perhaps incarceration will come back. So they will tell us basically how the world is our cage. And how we are going to respond to that, I am not really able to speculate, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. This is a very optimistic narrative with a tragic end, right? So contrary to reverting the structure of most of the other talks. Okay, thank you very much. I'll just hand over to you, Jerry, for your intervention.
No Q&A, or?
No, we'll take it after the two talks, I think, yeah.
Very different talks. So.
Yeah, but that's also note that we get some contrast. So that's
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Jerry Yan. I'm general partner of HCVC, so we're a venture capital firm based in Paris, with one partner based in Silicon Valley, and we invest in Europe, in US, early stage startups, hot tech, so aerospace, mobility, energy, zero carbon, medical devices, and all that. So I think Adam asked me to talk about the future of venture capital, but I think we should start with what is venture capital. It is one of the least understood industries on earth, and as you all know, more or less, like the past 10 years, it used to be something hidden behind, but in the past 10 years, it becomes kind of the discussion, mainstream discussion on a lot of the news. I want to do this as I always do, in a sort of a interactive way. This helps me to understand to what extent you can understand, what I'm going to talk about. So, how many of you here have never heard about the word venture capital? Have never? Never. Okay, everybody heard about it. That's nice. Does anyone of you feel that you have a description about what venture capital is, what VC is? Yeah, please. Okay. Yeah, I think that's part of the spirit. There are a lot of investment that are high risk. I think some gamblers will tell you them going to the casino is also an investment, which is not. So casino is a net negative expected value game because the house have to take some money. So I think that was a very good sort of starting point, right? So we're talking about risk here. So in French, venture capital is called capital risque, so risk capital. Actually, there was some argument that venture capital was invented by the French guy. So you probably know there's a French business school called INSEAD in Fontainebleau. The founder of INSEAD was actually the first venture capitalist because he invested in the company, I think, back in 1940 or 50 after the war. The first ticket into the company, and that company eventually went IPO, and he made about 100 times of the money back that he put into it. So risk is obviously a very important part of that, but what are the risks we're talking about here? So all the financial investment across all asset classes, they all have risk. So if we start from the safest one being US Treasury, we just saw that the US government they increased the debt ceiling again, so they kept the promise that they would never default on US. Personally, I think they should just lift the entire thing. There shouldn't be a debt ceiling, but so that was the safest investment you can do. So basically meaning that you can buy a US Treasury bond at issuance, and they will issue every year your sort of the interest payment to you, and at the end of the period, they say it's a 1-year bond or 2-year bond or 5-year bond, you get your principal back. In the finance industry, we assume US Treasury bills as the safest, almost zero risk instruments. And everything else is more risky, is riskier than US Treasury. So anyone of you know today what is roughly the range of the US Treasury bills, let's say 2-year or 5-year Treasury bill today? What's the interest rate they're paying now? It's not a day-to-day thing you do when you Google. Roughly 3.5 to 4%. Here in Europe, we're somewhere around 3.8%. So 2 years ago, it was 0. So we went from 0 to 3.5% to fight inflation. Okay, so take this one as the safest ever investment you can do. Uncle Sam always pay its bill most of the time. Venture capital as an asset class, does anyone want to guess what kind of return we have to give to our investors to justify for them to invest in our asset class in percentage per year? Any guess? 20, 30?
In Italy, the average is actually negative. But
that's a result. So we are talking about required rate of return, not realized return. Yeah, so the 30 is ballpark. That's a figurative requirement for us. So if you plot all the asset classes, bonds, government bonds, corporate bonds, public market stocks, large cap market stocks, small stocks, private equity, hedge fund, venture capital. Venture capital is at the far right in terms of required rate of return, which is the rate of return, which is the return rate for you to promise the investor that they can come into your asset class. So that's the number one thing. We're talking about very, very risky investment class that if I don't promise my investors 30% annualized return, they wouldn't come in to invest in my fund. So that's number one thing. Number two feature, in all the financial asset classes, this is the only asset class where majority of the fund managers were not trained in finance. So there are people like me. So I was an engineer for 12 years. I was an entrepreneur for 4 years, sold the company in 2008. Majority of the venture capitalists, especially in the United States, they were former engineers, former entrepreneurs, former executives at Google or Facebook or Amazon. So this is also very particular. So you're thinking about this financial asset class being run by people who never received financial training. So that's also one thing very interesting. So with those two in mind, we can jump to the third most distinct feature of this asset class. Do you know the idea of investment portfolio? When you construct a portfolio of different, let's say if you buy stocks, you construct a portfolio of different stocks inside, and you hopefully that they won't move in all one direction, and you can mitigate the risk and all that, diversify your holding. In venture capital, we're so weird that when we construct a portfolio, let's say, for example, for us, we see about 1,000 companies per year, 1,000 startups per year. We eventually invest in probably 10 of them, and we spend 3 years to invest out of one fund. So as of today, we manage over 2 funds, 110 million euros. They say one fund is 30 million, and we invest 10 million per year into 10 companies, each one of them, over 3 years, and then we try to harvest the result in 8 to 10 years. Those 30 companies, however hard I work, however smart I am, however effortless I'm running around trying to find founders, however great the founders we all are when we invested, they all are when we invested, we expected that only 3 of them would be successful. So we go from 1,000 per year, so that's 3,000 per 3 years, to 3 companies that we expect would be successful. Okay? So if you look at portfolio construction, we're talking about constructing a portfolio of 30 stocks where you expect 27 of them would go to zero, would go kaput. Most of the people here are not in the financial industry. There's only one other asset class that looks like this. It's called the option trading.
The what?
Option trading.
Option.
So financial options, derivatives, is the only industry in finance industry where when you construct a portfolio, you expect majority of those assets to go to kaput, zero. Okay? And now you're starting to feel, okay, but if you know they're going to go to zero, why do we even put money into them in the first place? Because we do not know the future. Nobody knows the future. I mean, I would love that the prison disappearing being a realized future, but nobody really knows the future. If someone tells you they know the future, either she's trying to take your money or, it's definitely, nobody would know the future. So, but if we look at the other side, if you buy a mutual fund, the mutual fund, they have a brochure, and they say, we're going to buy, the goal is to put together 50 stocks, weighted this way and that way, and we'll pursue a certain strategy. They will never tell you that, but by the way, 90% of these companies will go to zero, and this is what you're buying into, right? Okay, so why is it that case? Why is it that what we do, that we're assuming 90% of them will go to zero? And why do I mention option trading? Because the venture capital investment, fundamentally, people think that, many people say, oh, venture capital is basically you go in, you buy, you give money to entrepreneurs, you buy, they say, 10% of the company, and then you invest in the company at a certain price, and one day they go IPO, they get acquired, you make 100x or 50x back, that's your business. On the surface, yes. But reality, no. Because when I give money to an investor, when I buy a stock, let's say I buy an Apple stock today, Apple has revenue, Apple has net income, Apple has paid dividend, Apple has a history of financial performances that I can try to justify the price I pay for, and I can try to guess what Apple share price would be in 1 year or 2 years. That's the public market. When the founder came to me and he just started a company, trying to work on something, and I'm convinced that he's gonna be the next Steve Jobs. When I gave him money, there was nothing there. There was just the person. So when I say I give you 1 million, I want to own 10% of the company, which means that your company is worth 10 million. What does it mean? Does it mean that his company is now worth 10 million or not? No. And does it mean that I gave him 1 million, therefore the price I pay is the right share price of the company at that time? No, it's not. Because apparently there's no way to judge how valuable this company, oh, I think this ran there. There's no way to judge how valuable this company at this stage. So what happened in reality, actually, the money I gave him, the 1 million, it's more like an option than a stock transaction. I'm giving him 1 million to give me an option to participate in the upside of the future of the company. And in this case, because I'm trying to talk about upside that could be 100x or 50x or 200x and sometimes 1,000x, for me, it doesn't matter if some of them go to zero, because that's not my game. My game is more like option traders. Option traders will be buying call option or put options that look ridiculous to normal people. For example, if the Apple share price today, if it's like $100, you will see option traders buying call options which give them the right to buy Apple share in 1 year, for example, at $120. And nobody will say, why are you stupid? It's $100 now. Why don't you just buy $100 of Apple today? Why do you want to buy a right, pay money for a right that you can buy the Apple stock for $120 in 1 year? But that's the point of option. Option is that it gives you an opportunity to get this exposure to the upside with a very minimum cost. Because if you want to buy an Apple stock today at 100, you have to pay 100. But if you bet that Apple stock would be 140 in 1 year, and you're willing to buy a call option at 120 strike price, you might only need to pay $1 or $2 to get that strike price, to get that option. And this is my job. My job is to find the optionality in entrepreneurs, in potentials of a certain company for the future. Okay.
That's 15 minutes.
I know. So we talked about this already. So this is just to hammer in the sort of the differences between venture capital and the other classes. So given all that, coming back to I think the topic today. I mean, we talk a lot about like society and all that. What is the future of venture capital? So venture capital has become such a famous subject in the daily news the past 10 years. One of the main reasons for that was actually because of zero interest rate. A lot of the venture capital growth between 2010 and 2020 or 21 was zero interest rate. When I say zero interest rate, it's very important because zero interest rate can affect many things. The main thing that it affected is that if you have zero interest rate, you have a lot of capital in the market. The capital has to go somewhere. They have to go somewhere. They have to find places to invest. And if you have zero interest rate, I don't know if you're familiar with, probably not, there's a stock valuation model, which is basically the first year of dividend divided by R minus G. So R being the required rate of return, G being the growth. So now if you have zero interest rate, R becomes zero. And zero minus something positive is negative. So you have a value that is negative in that equation. So the only way to mitigate this is that you go for hypergrowth. We're talking about 100% year to year, 200% year to year. You hide your money behind hypergrowth, which gives you a chance not to talk about how profitable the company is, how soon can they become a profitable company, when can they become cash flow positive. And this is basically the story of venture capital becoming this mainstream talk of the topic over the 10 years, because we have zero interest rate environment, and out of those capital created, part of that comes into venture capital and created this boom. So the future of venture capital today, obviously now you can guess what I'm talking about. Now interest rate is, like I said, US Treasury bill 3.5. My banker is offering me the CD, the credit deposit, at 3.8% for 1 year. All of a sudden, if you don't want to use your brain, you put your money into a CD, you get 3.8% 1 year later without working anything. So venture capital now face a big issue because of this huge correction. We have, this is like 10 years of zero interest rate. We have a generation of young venture capitalists that did not know what it mean, what a cost of capital means. They did not understand that capital comes with a cost. And so when the market started correct in 2021 and 2022, we still have a lot of venture capitalists today that are in disbelief. They do not believe that the situation has changed completely. They're still trying to feel that, oh, it's going to come back and all that. On the assumption that we will never go back to 0% interest rate, the future of venture capital has completely changed. Completely changed. We will not be seeing, I'm going to make some prediction as you did, so because that seems to be the theme this afternoon. We're not going to see venture capitalists putting money in companies like Uber or Airbnb, taking dramatic loss in the early days, never hoping them to turn positive. Okay, that's not going to happen because your capital now has a cost. So that's the number one thing. So we're seeing the boom years of the 10 years, so some people will come to me, hey, Jerry, I have an idea. I feel that there's inefficiency in this Italian market. I can build a software to change that. Maybe. But just keep in mind, there's not going to be free capital for you from the venture capitalists to help you get to a certain level where you have the amount of numbers and to justify what you're doing. But on the other hand, you saw something else accelerating dramatically during these 2 years of downturn already that's happening. The number one thing, artificial intelligence. So this is the first AI that touched so many people because the large language model, the power of large language model unlocked a lot of the imagination of human beings. It's the first time AI touched normal people, to be serious. I mean, for a long time you've been using the face ID, which is also a different type of artificial, but you don't know. But this is the first time people are conscious that they're using AI to help what they do. And it's very, very useful if you know what it's doing, if you know what you're getting, right? So we have this weird situation where a lot of investors lost faith in venture capital. But you have something that's exploding on the side. And the net result is that most of the new money now goes into ChatGPT-like kind of investment. There's FOMO again, there's potential boom and bust again. But what I can assure you is that we started with internet in the 90s, okay? And then we have mobile internet. You add one extra layer of intelligence, which is artificial intelligence. The multiplying effect of this whole thing basically opened up a lot more opportunities for real entrepreneurs to come in and build businesses. So in other words, what I'm trying to say that despite the fact that the previous decade of venture capital is now being canceled, cancel culture in a different way, canceled for different reasons, including money that went into crypto for no good reason, money that went into SaaS company at 50x the revenue as a variation, those are being corrected now. But we are also at a point where already mobile internet is already very powerful. Now you throw on top of that, they multiply. And since they multiply, which brings me to probably a good way to conclude my talk about this. Another significant feature about venture capital is that we are going for power law. Okay, a lot of the discussion today, this morning and this afternoon, what I pick up as a VC is that a lot of discussion was linear discussion. Linear discussion meaning that it's something you plot on the graph and linear scale that you can see it. But everybody here experienced the first personal exponential story the past 3 years, coronavirus. When you see the numbers of corona, the infected people during the first year, 2020, you cannot plot on linear scale because it goes through the roof. Why? Because it's like multiplying. Every one person outside will just transmit to another 3 to 4 people. But this is actually our business. Our business is to find things that multiply, things that scale, things that would follow a power law instead of linear law to success. And so for us, VC, this is like the future has never been brighter. And we're not talking about artificial intelligence replacing human beings, no. We're just talking about the mechanical effect of all those layers interacting with each other, multiplied by so many people using mobile internet and artificial intelligence. And there's gonna be all those unexpected things that happen, and it's our job to capture that as a venture capitalist. So I hope with that very short description, you can get a feeling both what VC really is and what we are excited about going forward. And the reason I'm here today, other than Adam being a good friend, is also if you are starting a new company, you have my email, jerry@hcvc.co. I'm always open to talk to founders, shameless self-promotion. And if you know some founders that are working on something interesting, I'm definitely happy to have a call. Thank you.
Okay, thank you both very much. Thank you very much. We now have some time for questions. I definitely have some questions, but I'm going to invite from the floor first, and I think we'll just take the questions together, and then we'll, as last time, we'll let the two speakers reply. So I think Michael is first, and then Ayur, and then Aris, and then also Stephen, and also Vincenzo, and that's it, maybe, right? Yeah.
They all want to start a startup.
What?
They all want to start.
They want to start.
I
have a startup idea as well. I'll tell you later. Michael, please.
Okay, so a quick question for each of the panelists. The first presentation on prisons. My question is simply, do you promise? My question for you is simply, what constitutes, you said what you're interested in finally is the multiplying effect of the layers. What constitutes a layer? How do you know when a layer has achieved a kind of real salience? I mean, right, so absolutely undeniably, AI is in the news now. There's buzz about it. It feels like a layer. And I'm just kind of curious, from your point of view on the ground, how you actually decide that a layer is, real or has legs or will last in significant.
We will start with the promise.
I will take all the questions together, so take notes, please. Yes, please. Okay, thank you. Aris.
Question for Jerry. Fascinating talk. Thank you for it. And it's really great to see, and I think I like the parallel with options trading because that's a world that I know a little bit more, like speaking to traders. And it's great to see your perspective on like this last few years of recession and inflation and what that means for VCs. My question to you is, the decade you described of exuberance and of this kind of like, I don't know, maybe you didn't say that, but like there's some opportunity, right? Some kind of like, let's jump on that wave and do great things. And part of those great things, as you were saying, is kind of construct futures that, don't really exist, or values that are, there was like a made up thing, right? Like fiction coming to reality. That's not derogatory, I think that's
No, for sure.
So my question to you is, what happens in this Because you look for exponential growth, but in an environment that is capital is expensive. So then where does that leave you in terms of your, that, what do you do with that imagination of the VC?
Yeah, cool.
Okay. Thank you. So, Stephen?
Yeah, great talk. Again, just one for both of you. So the way you describe venture capital sounds to me a lot like film and TV. The way to think of that there are basically options, because most film and TV don't make any money. So it's the same thing, they're just waiting for those big hits or whatever. And similarly, you have a generation of writers who've grown up thinking that there's more and more jobs for writers, and that's at the heart of the WGA strike, particularly why AI is so key to this. And the financing structure has changed, so there's paragraph. But the problem is that if you read a lot of industry, sort of academic industry criticism in the last 4 months, which you hear something you haven't heard for the last 2 years, which is TV is not that great anymore. Prestige TV is over, and we're going back to schlock TV, and there really seems to be a pullback of the academy and a lot of, TV is just no longer the place. And so, given the fact that VC and film and TV production seem so similar for the first half, there might be this possibility, that might be a specific counterfactual of that. And then just very quickly for the other talk, I've been teaching prison abolition. I teach at a university for aspirational middle class students, so I've been teaching for 10 years. And what's happened over the last 10 years is now almost invariably students are really down with prison abolition. You don't get the what about they violent, they're just almost universally. But when I ask them, so that's all kind of great, but when I ask them if they can tell me how to get to the prison closest to them on public transport, I've yet to have a student who could answer that question. Because prison still imagines an immediate image. People feel that they've been in prison. And there just seems to be this big disconnect between, even at the most basic level, where is the president closest to you? Just nothing. It's just a sort of absence. So I wonder if that's sort of one of the nuts to crack about prison abolition, from the purely idealist or rhetorical or ideological to be actually, let's see what my day is like if I'm trying to go to the local president.
Okay. Vincenzo, and then Cecilia, and then yes, please.
I have two questions. So the first is in the Neapolitan digital press. We have a lot of Neapolitan unique narrative on the social media. So we have one for the people in jail, or for more specific for the families of these people. So this is also a thing that we see in South America, and also what we can expect when the walls of the prison will fall. What type of interaction on the digital media, on social media, we can expect on people that are incarcerated but not in prison?
Cecilia, finally, you want to make there's a, what is it, a plane? Yeah? Train? No, it's Superman. Thank you. I have a final question for you is, why is all this going to happen?
Why is this all going to happen?
Anyways, so maybe we'll reverse the order in the answers. We'll start with Jerry.
By the third question, I forgot the first one, but let me try to address that. So, I think
the first question I think was, how do you understand similar, right?
Yes, similar. Yeah. Actually, I think all of them I can lump them in together.
Yeah.
So, in my 30 minutes talk, I didn't have the chance to talk about another few points. But just to summarize one thing, all your question about that, randomness. Most of the human beings do not understand how important randomness plays in human society. because we tend to, smart people, okay, like really not so smart people, they would, like in Taiwan, they would be super superstitious. They would go to the temple, they would go to fortune tellers because they don't know the future. They don't know. It's the middle layer of like reasonably smart people who study a lot, who read a lot, who build this perception that we understand how things function. And that's the most dangerous layer. That's the most dangerous. Did I hurt any ego here? But, me included. That's the most dangerous layer. Before I talk about how I'm going to address what you all say, I just want to recommend one writer. Actually, you'll be surprised to understand my industry in a real philosophical way. This writer is actually better than everybody else. So Nassim Taleb. So Nassim Taleb touches on a lot of the essence of my industry with his 7 books, and especially the last one, Skin in the Game, which is actually the fundamental how we execute in our industry, having the skin in the game for everybody to make it work. But we don't have time for that today. So coming back to randomness, Nassim Taleb also talked a lot about randomness. We kind of, because of all the information and all the education, we kind of believe that we human beings evolve or advance in a controlled manner. So for example, we have academia who research, I was from semiconductor, right? So semiconductor research, doing this and that, we kind of slowly but surely moving forward. I'm from Taiwan. Some of you probably heard about a company called TSMC, which is the leading semiconductor manufacturing company on earth. Really, really complicated technology, working with European suppliers and American suppliers. People tend to think that's how it works. But majority of the major breaking point of human history in terms of economics and society, many of them are random. Very good example, we're talking about that with Stephen, penicillin. Penicillin was discovered out of randomness by accident. And penicillin changed the world entirely. The First World War, there were like more than how many people, 100,000 people who died on the battlefield, like in the trenches?
Probably millions.
Millions, right? Because there was no penicillin. And so when you get infected, you die. You die in the hospital. And the Second World War, you had so many people who came home missing an arm, missing a leg, but they're alive. Penicillin also changed the perception about doctors as a job. You probably don't know, in the 19th century, doctors were not very well respected because they killed more people than they saved. And most of the reason was because there was no penicillin back then. So if you cut something, try to treat something, there's a better chance you get infected because of that cut, they say operation or surgery, than getting treated. But penicillin brought the doctor's status to the top. Why am I talking about this one? Penicillin doesn't seem to be something that connected to minors, but actually it is exactly what it was, venture capital was for. Venture capital is a structural way to try to capture the randomness that would turn into a system that dominate the human economy dramatically. This is our business. Our business is trying to find the unlikely black swan that would turn into the next staple of the human economy society. And if we are successful, if we're lucky enough to find those people and bet on them with enough conviction, then we benefit from the outcome. But fundamentally, we are trying to look for things that don't exist, that look ridiculous, it will never work. There's a very good book called It Will Never Work, written by the co-founder of Netflix. Very, very good book. Everybody told him it will never work. Mailing DVDs to people as a rental is a stupid idea. Eventually it worked. And that's our business. So coming back to the middle smart people, and then you started to see how we function as a VC. How we function as a VC, we take the knowledge and the belief of the smart people in the middle, and we push them aside and try to go the reverse. For example, Airbnb is a good example. Airbnb was passed on by so many investors. Why? Because why would you let a stranger sleeping in your living room? That's so dangerous. You could get stabbed, you could get robbed, and whatever. Why would you do that? And the founder somehow unlocked a human point in that relationship where it's actually fine. Human beings are not, they're not represented by those singular cases where you get stabbed or get, robbed by inviting a stranger into your home. And that unlocked entire value chain that didn't exist before. And that is a very good example of how you go the contrarian view you make a bait. And those the people that make a bait, obviously, they were very successful eventually. Yeah, I'll stop right there. I don't know if there's a few points, but if you just think about randomness, think about, you mentioned all the layers, right? So the more the layers multiply, the more randomness will happen inside, the more there's a chance for me to find a black swan in that increased randomness, and which hopefully will become the system eventually.
Okay, thank you very much. Corina?
Okay, so I do promise that prisons will disappear eventually. In a long time, as I said, we won't be alive to see it. Neither will my grandchildren. But that does not mean that the criminal justice system will disappear, that punishment as a social institution and as a sentiment will disappear, nor that detention will disappear. But just prisons as we know them today will disappear. My intervention was in a way a metaphor to say how that will happen. But it was based in today's conditions. Were we on a perspective of today's conditions? The one that I anticipated is my perspective. The one from field work, from Latin America and Mexico, from feminism, and from cooperation with the civil society and international bodies. It was also a metaphor of prison conditions in a way. So I will go back to the questions, I will answer the questions based on the intervention. So why did I say that Western Europe will take the lead? Because here the population is decreasing. And it's decreasing at the general prison population is, the general world population has increased by 28% in the last 20 years. Prison population in Europe has gone down by 27%. That does not mean, again, that prisons will disappear shortly. Actually, there is a possible risk of net widening. What we see is different tendencies. For example, in Italy, we have that an increase of alternatives to incarceration leads to a decrease of the prison population. But in other countries, we see that an increase of alternatives to incarceration are still accompanied by an increase of the prison population. That is called net widening. So alternatives to incarceration are not the panacea. They don't mean less people in prison. But I decided to assume that if we do it in a certain way that is explained in literature and handbooks, the two things can be achieved. More alternatives to incarceration, less people in prison. And there are countries that have achieved it through an integrated approach. Media campaign, legislative changes, more resources for non-alternatives to non-custodial measures, decriminalization of certain offenses, particularly drug-related. So there are means that are put in place to achieve a reform that is still a reform. It's not disappearance of prison. So why did I say that the UN Security Council won't be so much on the game? Because of the opposition of Russia, China, and the US. Prison population is increasing and will continue to increase. I don't remember the last data, so what I say may be very wrong, a bit wrong or right, that there are more or equal people under custody in the US than there are people under e-carceration. That is, with electronic monitoring. So incarceration is not the only way of depriving people of liberty. Home detention and electronic monitoring are ways of depriving people and families. You bring prison into your home. So it's not only the prison population, but again, the connection with net widening. And as you said, there is a connection with private capital and industries, especially in the US. So not necessarily this tendency, that's what I said, it will have different moments in different countries and regions, depending on the sentiment, on prison as a means of social control and as an institution. Also, there is another interesting effect, another interesting thing in the US, which is related to social control. In some states, you lose the right to vote when you are in prison. You lose it forever. And that directly affects the democratic participation of black communities. That's not the case in most European countries. You can either vote whether you are on remand or convicted, or only if you are on remand, or if you are convicted for certain offenses but not others. That is also a reflection of the sentiment we have about punishment and people deprived of their liberty, and of how we see them as citizens or not. The UK, for example, is quite restrictive in that sense. When you referred to female population, I did not understand if you referred to female population in Europe or in Latin America? In Latin America. So the female population in Latin America has been increasing. It still represents a minority, about 6.6% of the general prison population. Drug-related offenses are the main cause of incarceration. Drug laws in Latin America reflect the international drug conventions on drugs, but mainly the influence of the United States in shaping the drug policies agenda, as well as the general tendencies to recur to incarceration that is common in the region. So, for example, in Panama, you will have that 70% of women in prison are there for drug offenses, as opposite to 30% of men. So it's a very gender-skewed phenomenon, the incarceration for drug offenses. Prison conditions are usually appalling for everyone, so also with regards to access to education, it will vary from country to country and from prison to prison. There are some amazing university programs in prisons, but generally speaking, people in prison, people live in overcrowded, violent prisons that are underserved by all services. Usually the weight of the prison is carried by families, specifically by women and children, who queue to take to the prison to the incarcerated father or relative everything: medication, shampoo, mattresses, clothes, booze, everything. So it's a system that highly relies on the unpaid and invisible work of women, basically. The general prison population, the most visible one, incarcerated people, are mainly men, 94.4%. But if we think of prison population as all the people impacted by incarceration, it's female, because it's mainly wives, sisters, girlfriends, lovers, sexual workers, all the female population that rotates around the prison system. So yes, access to education, as it is access to health and to other basic items, it's quite unequal across the region, but usually prisons are very unserved. There is a prison crisis in Latin America. Another thing that I wanted to say is also, again, the sentiment and the use of prisons. So we have, for example, now Nicaragua, where prisons are used for political crackdowns by the Ortega dictatorship. We have El Salvador with Bukele, who is using prisons for his war against gangs, and the prison inmates are kept in appalling conditions with very severe human rights violations, but the prison rates have gone, the homicide rates have gone down dramatically. So you have some sort of support, of social support, because you are cracking down on gangs at the cost of severe human rights violations that fall upon the inmates and their families as well. So we always have, this very multiple uses for prison that will change according also to the political regime and to what is also accepted internationally. This is also why I mentioned the Council of Europe as the leader of this reform in Europe, because it is the guardian of human rights in Europe. And because I work for the Council of Europe as a consultant, so I'm quite aware of what they do in terms of all the tools that they make, conventions and handbooks and guidelines, and they're all amazing work, but of course the difficulty is to implement them. So again, as I said, the description that I gave was trying to also be a metaphor of what we have in place, but what other things should or could be put in place to make sure that this happens in a coordinated way. Now, there's also another issue. When we look at the life stories of people in prison, again, we find more substance use, we find adverse childhood experiences. There is not a single woman in prison that I've spoken to that has not started her story with the sexual violence and rape in childhood. So this is why in my point two, I was talking of a society, and I know that's sadly the most ideal part of my intervention, that would work better in preventing adverse childhood experiences, in working with families, in working with the changing paradigm of masculinity and more equity between men and women, and to make men and women, more safe in their relationship. I'm talking about femicide here. And, but again, because the idea is that if we nurture better our society, then people will be less exposed to be criminalized, and to perhaps sometimes find in prison the only time where they can have a voice, access to health, solidarity and friendship, and this is why I concluded by saying that formerly incarcerated people will tell us about the freedom they found in prison, not only because of the cages we live in, which we do, and I mean they're real, but also because sometimes living conditions outside of prison have been so dramatic, and I'm thinking about all the women I've met in Latin America and Mexico especially, that the state and society only look at you when you become a prison number and a crime they can attach to you. Everything that was done to you before, the way that the law was broken against you, is not seen. But once you're there, once you have that identity as an inmate, sometimes it's the first time you can go to the doctor, you can have a decent pregnancy, and it's not decent in prison, but it's more decent than the ones they have outside. You can read, you can learn to read and write. So it was also, and in a way, because there is this common condition of deprivation of liberty, in a way, going back to these communities that Aris was telling us about. I'm not sure that prison can constitute one of those communities, as astrology, as but in a way that there is this sharing of an identity, of a condition that can bring identity possibilities that were precluded for them, for us, before. So that's why I referred to these formerly incarcerated people sharing their freedoms with us. There was a question that I didn't fully understand, Vincenzo, which was about digital contents.
Yeah.
Can you explain it to me again, and I will try to answer.
The type of narratives that the family of the people of this woman in jail act on the digital. What type of? Because we in Naples have some sort of glorification and.
It's a genre, social media
Yes.
posts, right? I mean, this thing of people. One is the person coming home from prison, and then people film it, and then there's some music.
Yes, you're right. Now that's a very another thing that it's. I haven't, to be honest, I haven't done research on it. I've only seen it, by going in and in and in. But there is a reality of prison here that I'm not even close to describing, which is the reality of people. Some of the people being incarcerated, families and communities, where it can be actually, come si dice, an act of, it gives you status to have been incarcerated. Yes, that definitely happens, and also it can be associated, at least in the Latin Mexican context, with songs that exaltate the criminal, the narco, no? Not so. I don't know much about people in prison. I don't know about those digital contents, but about exalting some sort of criminal activity. I'm not sure how and if that will change. Of course, it's not something that I study, but it does exist also in the Latin American context. Yeah, but especially related. They're called narco corridos. Qui sarebbero i neomelodici, può essere una cosa simile? No, più o meno non è.
C'è uno neomelodico che si chiama il latitante.
Ecco. I don't know if I addressed all the points, but I think I can shut up now. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Karina. I just ask you to stay on, because we're now starting a bit with these the panels, which basically we conceive to be a little bit more interactive. So, and I would suggest that we go immediately move on to the first panel, because it's still raining, I think, or maybe it's stopping now, but. No, so we can then maybe hopefully spend another half an hour or something discussing, and then the rain will clear and we can go out and maybe enjoy a nicer coffee break after that, right? So the first panel is on the future of technology, and unfortunately Tiziano Bonini was not unable to make it, but I would ask Leopoldina if you could join us here on the table.
I mean this one?
Yes, you're in this one as well.
Me too, and I know.
Yeah. So. So the idea of the panels basically is to have a more widespread discussion, and they're also, of course, titled in these very generic terms, the future of technology. What does that mean? Nobody knows, right? So the way in which we thought about structuring them is we'll first ask the panelists to just give a very quick position, right? I mean, it could be your own speculations. You don't have to be coherent or grounded in knowledge or anything, but, your position, whatever this topic inspires in you, 5 minutes, right? Very, very quick, right? And then we'll open up for a discussion, and we try to make it a bit more of a dialogue in a sense, and we'll go on until the discussion ebbs out or until the sun comes back, and we feel that we want to interrupt. But maximum, I suggest another half an hour, 45 minutes, or something like that, right? Also because then we reach a point of exhaustion in a sense, right? So, and I think this theme, the future of technologies, has a lot of overlaps with what's been said so far in the panel. Great. Sorry about that. Just bring it to your side. What's been said so far in the panel, because of course we had Jerry's intervention, but there was also a lot of talk about technology in Corina's intervention, right? And the ways in which we're seeing a sort of a technologization of a whole series of functions like surveillance and the management of social relations and all these sorts of things, right? And of course, technology has been at the heart, and the future of technology has been the heart of Leopoldina's work for a long time, right? So I think I would just ask you to start, Leopoldina, if you want to give us your 5 minutes on this issue, right? Yeah, yes.
I did my duty for home, but I already said everything this morning. So now I would like to pick up Stephen's intervention this morning, and this idea of sensing capitalism, combining it with the surveillance, the theme of the surveillance capitalism. I think that they are both right. So we could consider them as the two faces of the same coin, in the sense that I was thinking, for example, to social media, no? How they rebuilt a discipline, a social hierarchy between people, influencers, followers, which is the opposite of what we did with the political and social movement, in which we were all equal to each other. Independently, Pizzorno wrote a very interesting paper about that, about how the movement works, how political movement works, and the relationship between activists. And he said that the very good in political experience is also socialization. And socialization under the equality perspective, in the sense that when we are militants, we are, despite the fact that one is a student, the other is a professor, the other is a worker, and the other is another thing. This is somehow out of the question, and we equal among activists. And now we see that one of the political outcome of social media is the re-establishment at social level of discipline, difference between people, between those who are influencers and those who are followers. And I think this is tragic. Followers reminds us, very bad imagination about dictatorship, about something which is profoundly wrong for humankind. And we should think about this, because this is one of and then discussing with Monica underlined also how in this new discipline is reconfiguring now the capital as a social relationship, as influencer gain money about all the followers, you know, and this is and reconstruct this the capitalist relationship inside also social media. So, and the profoundly anti-educational effect, outcome of social media, because social media are inhabited by a lot of young people, and they are continuously diseducated, and diseducated to the value of equality, of solidarity, etc. And it is a kind of working on the wrong direction, but all without any clear image. No, it is all mystified. It is all the meaning is all under the facade. This is.
Thank you. Thank you. Jerry, if I say the future of technology, what do you say?
So you asked me about my opinion about Silvio Berlusconi. Okay, so future of technology. So the only thing I can say is that if you look at the human beings, the past 200, let's say, post-industrial revolution kind of a history, it's almost like one-directional, but I think we're definitely at the stage where technology is available to almost every single human being on Earth, almost, which is very different, because if those of you familiar with the Japanese like history post-war, is like coming out of poverty. In the 60s and 70s, the biggest topic was like, can every family get a washing machine, the air conditioner, and the TV? And the washing machine released the mothers from doing house chores, save a lot of time, and obviously TV is like entertainment. And then back then you can think about technology touching people in a very, very sporadic way, where it kind of go from family, household to household, depends on GDP and all that. But I think the past 15 years we see technology spreading like virus to all sorts of income level. Today you can be coming from a less privileged country, and you have an Android smartphone. Or you can be coming from California, you have the latest, iPhone 14 Pro Max plus minus all the addition to the date. But you all have the same access to the same internet outside of China. You have the same access to the same kind of through the technology. So if I can say anything, I think going to the future, sort of doubling down on my argument about the layers of technology, now you throw in AI, it would open up more access for people to technology. So already you saw some news talking about people who don't know how to code. Today they just ask ChatGPT to write a code for them. And you can go on YouTube and search for people who try that and have ChatGPT to write a code for them to do something. So that, for me, if I'm just one word, I think it would be the future of technology is basically everybody will have access to technology. Yeah.
Corina, we have your take on this as well?
I will be quick and I'll be unstructured. So I think that in terms of medicine, it will be amazing what it will achieve. I mean, I'm not an expert on medicine at all, so here, Monica, you will. But, just seeing recent developments, I think it will help many, many people, and that will be pretty amazing. I don't think it will be of equal access, like nothing is and has never been for all people. I think that it will increase connectivity, as it is already doing. as Jerry said, basically everyone can have a smartphone. We're seeing it, for example, in the northern Mexican border, where you have these migrants from Central America that have gone all through unsurmountable barriers and poverty and struggles and kidnappings and rapes and da-da-da, but they arrive at the northern border with a cell phone. And through apps, it's being made, if not easier, but at least doable to understand what the process to ask for asylum or whatever in the US is. So I think it can really increase connectivity and make some processes speedier or of easier access for everyone. At the same time, it is not necessarily accessible in terms of costs. And the social divide worries me a bit. In Mexico, we saw during the pandemic 1,300,000 children left the school system because of poverty. Some of them, because the schools locked down, shut down for 2 years. There was no alternative, not decent structured alternative. There was in private schools, like the one where my son goes, but not in all of them. And also, I'm thinking of one of the women I met in prison. She has 3 children, 2 of them of school age, the other with paralysis, cerebral paralysis. So it doesn't speak, it doesn't move, it doesn't do anything. So her choice during the pandemic had to be, do I buy diapers, do I buy rice, or do I buy $1 data so that my little girl can follow the online class on the cell phone? So that, for me, would be the most concerning issue regarding technology. Looking really at the level, at the ground level of the poorest, what's accessible for everyone, but literally at what cost?
Thank you very much. Yeah, of course.
May I add a thing? That in the US, for example, they take away the mobile phone to migrants when they arrive in order to impede all these, connection with the family, etc. And another thing I wanted to add about China. The surveillance, of course, is very strong, but and real, is a reality. But also the resistance that people put on against this surveillance. For example, a Chinese colleague told me that at the beginning of the internet, the government was surveilling, was controlling all people was writing in the online, etc. And they understood that they had to write stupid things for the 10 pages, the first 10 pages, and then write the right comments, etc. And because the Chinese functionary of the government, at certain points, okay, this doesn't contain anything very important, so they stopped to control. And from that point, the true conversation was coming in. Maybe I think also can be added in this landscape that we must be prepared also to the creation of tools like ChatGPT, for example, tool like that in the hands of rights. Elon Musk is organizing a ChatGPT right, because this ChatGPT for him is too liberal, is something, that try to stay in the middle, not... so we need to be prepared, we need also to understand that this will happen. So, and the capacity of persuasion a tool like that can have, which has no problem of bias, cultural, gender, etc. bias. It's not at all, because they want to produce this. So this is scaring, but we must be prepared to deal also with this kind of things.
Mentions from the public, it doesn't have to be a question, could just be your opinion or criticism or whatever. I think Cecilia was first, and then Monica and the gentleman over there. Yes, Cecilia, please.
The energy, we were discussing with you this morning about the fact that Silvia Federici is saying that digital technologies are eating the world because, you know, in Africa, in a lot of places, so the China, now India, for example, the mobile phone, etc. In the mobile phone, there are a lot of suicides of Chinese workers. There are a lot of bad wage paid to workers, a lot of the infinite number of hours of work. In ChatGPT, there is a lot of work, very bad paid to Kenyan women. So we should have a complex image. What is behind this, the island where the waste mobile phone and computer are, you know, in China and other parts of the world, are polluting in a terrible way very big areas. So the war about cobalt, the rare elements, so there is, if we look again, this mystifying power these enterprises have to present only the face of innovation and nothing, behind, is incredible, but we should look at these technologies also with this layer, because it is very important, very important.
If I may comment a little bit on this one. So I mentioned a bit about linear and power law. So look at the world from a linear perspective. And imagine a power law taking over something. And if you draw lines of linear line and power line, if you ever just draw them, just do a calculation, you realize you cannot do it at the same time. And the reason I'm mentioning this was it's very, very easy to think about, okay, global warming, we're all dying with like real weather, and we should be reducing this consumption, that consumption, we should be doing this, doing that. If all of us do this and do that, you probably bump into 10 vegans the past, months that tell you if we all stop eating meat, then the world will be a better place. The modern history of human beings were seldom, the problems were seldom solved that way. Usually what happened is that there's exponential power law since they came over and just overwhelmed the entire effort from the previous decade. I'll give you one example. So not a very good, there's a moral example, but the invention of nuclear bomb, first atomic bomb, lead to the invention of nuclear fission power plant. If that hasn't been invented, we are in a much worse situation. And so first come back to the energy crisis. There are many, many aspects, and I believe all the countries, European Union, whatever, this collateral effort trying to make it better. I mean, I think for example in France, I'm in the process of buying an apartment. The government laws now say that if your insulation is fall below, they have a calculation like D, then you cannot resell this apartment until you improve that after 2025. So those are great, government level. Our job, coming back to optionality, is that it would be nice to imagine the whole world, 7 billion people decided to all stop eating meat and all eat whatever, something else like the beans. But instead of imagining that, the venture capitalist's job is to bet on, like for example, we did a fusion investment last year, and there's a reason why we do it at this timing, that in the hope that when it happens, that removes the question of energy supply completely. It will no longer be a supply issue. If you compare before fusion plant and after fusion plant, you see a big jump of that. So based on that principle, our view is always, okay, it's great that people are trying to reduce, like all the households, let's reduce 2 degrees of electricity spent every day. Or contrary, we put money into new endeavors that are trying to, you probably heard about a crazy kind of domain of technology called carbon capture. So trying to bring the carbon that we put into the air back into something and trap it there. You probably heard about all the efforts. We invest in a company that's doing mass production for lab-grown meat. Fundamentally, meat is a question of how much energy comes in and how much protein came out. We do need protein as human beings. So if you can do a controlled environment to produce that more efficiently than even like growing beans, then you have a solution there to solve the problem that human beings do need proteins. And beans are not necessarily super, they're prone to disease and all that, so it's not necessarily the most stable supply of like protein. So that's sort of to address your question. I understand food is, my mother is vegetarian, and she's like saving everything. She would recycle everything, and she would encourage us to do the same thing. Yeah, I think 7 billion people, if we all do that, we'll be in a better place now. But I'm more a believer, because of my job, of like really the power law. If I can bet on technology that will just overtake all those efforts and jump to the next generation, I would do it. At least that's my job. Yeah, I hope that helps.
Well, the Italian government, in its wisdom, has outlawed artificial meat, so so much for that.
But also, no,
Yeah,
sorry.
so I think you're
Okay.
next. Yes.
Okay, Monica.
Yeah, first him. I feel he was first, I think.
Thank you for sharing your findings, perspectives, and experiences, and everything was very interesting. I have a question, maybe for Romania, but it's just a general question. Because you mentioned how this new phenomenon of the social media influencers and followers, it has brought up a lot of different roles and importance of users participating in it, and you shared that you see this in a negative way because it's different goals, different importance, and it's fine. However, I was wondering whether what we see in this new phenomenon can be somehow similar to the not so new phenomenon of the populist leadership. For example, Jerry mentioned Berlusconi, and so basically my question is, what do you think about the difference between the new phenomenon of followers and influencers and populist leadership, which is not a new phenomenon?
Yes, I would say we do not need leaders. This is a commonplace, and now politics is, political people are always, the problem is the leader. We need a good leader. We don't need any leader, especially in the network society. What does it mean, a leader? We need people, activist people, that are able to organize themselves together and are able to produce political program, knowledge. This we need, and not the leader, the influence. So this is, I would say, a political architecture of social media is regressive, put us backward, not helps young generation to go ahead. I would say, I think about what Jerry said, that maybe an idea can be also the passport of things. They are producing Armani, etc., in this foundation in the UK. They are producing a way to acquire awareness about, for example, our dress, from where it comes. The buttons come from here. The cotton was raised in Egypt. The tailor was in Romania. And generally, we can see a very long way to assemble all these products inside a dress. And I was thinking, to follow also the comment, her comment, that we could do the same for technologies. But I would add also the average wage that people were paid for. So in for example, the mobile phone, how much children in Congo were paid to work and to raise the cobalt, for example. Average means. And then all this kind of, to look at this could be very interesting, and also could help to strengthen our awareness of the complexity of this technology and how profoundly we have to act in order to change the world, and also that it is not possible to change the world if we don't connect with the people in the world. So people in Congo, people there, etc. So to have the awareness that or we are able to organize with the others whenever they are, or we cannot win.
Okay. I mean, there is definitely, I mean, when the internet came, people thought that this was going to revitalize the modern public sphere, right? And, you know, everybody talked about and revitalization of democracy. But then something entirely different happened. And I think also Aris discussed this to some extent this morning, that there is, you know, there's definitely a different logic to public opinion formation, which is no longer perhaps so much deliberative as it is, well, he used the term speculative perhaps, but you could also think about it as influencer-based in some way, right? And the question then, of course, is what do you want to do with that? Do you want to repress it in some way, so re-educate people to become deliberative again, or find measures to reintroduce deliberation? Or do you want to think that maybe this speculation or this influencer economy can be tamed or transformed or into something else? And I think that is a very important question in terms also of theory. So last intervention, I think, by Monica, yes. It seems that it stopped raining, and I think we should end the panel here for now and take a break. And I'm sure the discussion can continue over coffee in the courtyard. So we'll take a nice break, and